I want you to picture something for a second. It is morning. You wake up. You put on a specific set of clothes.
Right.
Maybe a suit, maybe jeans, but definitely not a toga or, I don't know, a spacesuit. You walk into a meeting. You extend your right hand to a stranger, and you shake theirs. Up and down.
You don't even think about it.
Not for a second. You don't bow, you don't rub noses, you definitely don't slap them on the back. It's just automatic. We all do it. But have you ever stopped your hand in midair and asked, why?
Why this gesture?
Yes, why? Why do we follow these invisible scripts? Is it because we actually want to? Or is it because we're terrified of what happens if we don't?
That is the ultimate question of human behavior, isn't it? We like to think we're these autonomous agents making all these rational choices, but when you really zoom out, we are navigating a maze of invisible walls every single day.
Exactly. And that is what we're digging into today. Are we the architects of our own lives? Or are we just tenants in a building designed by dead people?
The powerful way to put it.
We are tackling the massive and often invisible force of custom and convention. And we're basing this analysis on a really rigorous essay from Mortimer Adler's Syntopicon.
For anyone who hasn't seen it, the Syntopicon is, well, it's essentially the user manual for Western civilization. It catalogs all the great ideas that have shaped history.
It's a map of what's called the Great Conversation.
It is.
Yeah.
It tracks how the smartest people who ever lived, from Aristotle all the way to Rousseau, argued about the things that really matter. And this topic, custom and convention. It might sound a little dry, but it's actually the battlefield where the war for human freedom has been fought for centuries.
Before we march onto that battlefield, I do need to make a quick disclosure. You are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM for deeper, more dynamic analysis. We're synthesizing a lot of complex philosophy here.
But the goal is to make it usable.
Right.
Our mission is to take these high-concept ideas and really ground them. We need to distinguish between the habits we inherit, that's custom, and the rules we agree upon, that's convention.
Because understanding that difference is key.
It's the only way to figure out which rules you should follow and which ones you might need to break.
Let's get into those definitions then. Because in just casual conversation, I feel like I use custom, tradition, and convention almost as synonyms.
Most people do.
I might say, it's customary to tip, or it's a convention to tip. If I'm looking for the cheat sheet from this essay, what is the actual distinction?
It is a crucial distinction. If you want the headline version, it's this. Custom is about habit and the unconscious. Convention is about agreement and the explicit.
Okay, hold on. Habit versus agreement. Can we stress test that a little?
Of course. Let's think about language. The fact that you and I are speaking English right now, that's a custom.
Right. I didn't sign a contract when I was a baby.
Exactly. You didn't agree to it. You absorbed it from your parents, from your community. It's a habit passed down through generations. It feels natural, almost biological, but it's actually just a very, very deep social habit.
Okay. But if I go to a conference and there's a sign that says, please silence your cell phones, that feels different.
Totally different. That is a convention. It's an explicit rule.
Right.
We, as a group, decided that ringing phones are annoying, so we made an agreement. Silence them.
So a convention implies a convening, a coming together to decide.
Precisely. Custom just sort of happens. It's already there.
So custom is the stuff that feels like it's always existed. The handshake, the English language, the fact that men wear ties even though they serve zero functional purpose.
Perfect example.
And convention is the stuff we sat down, maybe debated, and wrote a rule book for, like driving on the right side of the road.
You've got it. And the essay points out that Aristotle is the one who really codified this. He breaks it down into ethos and nomos.
Ethos and nomos. I know ethos usually connects to ethics or character, right?
Spot on. Aristotle uses ethos to describe custom because these customs form our character. He talks about internalized habituation, and this part is key.
Internalized habituation.
We don't follow customs because a police officer is standing there with a baton. We follow them because of an internal pressure. If you walked into an elevator and stood facing the back wall, staring at everyone,
Oh, that's uncomfortable just thinking about it.
you wouldn't get arrested.
No, but everyone would think I was a psychopath. I'd feel that burning social awkwardness.
That feeling.
Yeah.
That is the power of ethos. It's self-enforcing. It bypasses your logic and hits you right in the gut. That's custom. Nomos, or convention, the law is different. That's the speed limit.
Okay.
You might obey the speed limit because you think it's safe or maybe just because you don't want a ticket. The pressure is external.
That's a fantastic way to look at it. So custom is the operating system running in the background of our brains, the ethos. And convention is the software application we decided to install on top of it, the nomos.
That's a great analogy. And once you see that distinction, you start to see the cracks in the foundation, because this leads directly to the great debate that the essay outlines, a fight that started with the ancient Greeks and is still happening on social media today, which is a clash between physis and nomos.
Okay, we have nomos down. That's convention, the man-made rule. Physis sounds like physics, something physical.
It means nature. Physis is the natural world, the way things must be. Gravity is physis. You can't just vote to repeal gravity.
Right.
So the debate is this: which of our social rules are physis natural and unchangeable, and which are just nomos conventional and, well, made up?
I can see why this would get heated. If I say it's natural for humans to live in nucleofamilies, I'm basically saying it's like gravity. You can't mess with it.
But if I say,
But if I say the nuclear family is just a convention we invented in the industrial era, then suddenly it's up for debate. We can change it.
exactly, enter the sophists. These were the ancient Greek philosophers who were, in a way, the first radical deconstructionists. They started looking at everything: justice, morality, the class system, and asking,
Is this real?
is this real? Is this
Well-
nature? Or did some powerful people just make this up a few hundred years ago to stay in power?
That is dangerous territory. Because if you decide that something like thou shalt not steal isn't a law of the universe, but just a convention to protect private property, doesn't society start to wobble?
It absolutely does. That's why they were so controversial. If a rule is just nomos, it feels arbitrary. It can be changed. We can say, hey, this tax code isn't working. Let's rewrite it.
But you can't rewrite nature.
You can't. The sophists argued that almost everything we think of as sacred is actually just nomos. They stripped away the divine or natural authority of traditions.
So the real battleground is about permanence. If you want to protect a tradition, say, the definition of marriage or the structure of the economy, you argue it's physis, it's natural.
And if you want to revolutionize society,
You argue it's nomos, it's just a contract we can tear up and rewrite.
you have nailed it. And this isn't just dusty history. Think about the debates around gender roles today. One side argues strict gender roles are physis, biology, nature. The other side argues they're nomos, social constructs, performances.
And the essay shows us we've been having this exact same argument for 2,500 years.
We have.
It makes you look at your own beliefs and wonder, what am I assuming is gravity when it's actually just a traffic light?
And that is the perfect cliffhanger. Because there's one philosopher who took this idea that our customs are just shadows and built an entire model of reality around it. I'm talking about Plato. But before we descend into the cave, we should probably take a quick pause.
We should. We're going to take a brief moment to mention something that aligns perfectly with this kind of thinking. If you enjoy digging into these topics, really peeling back the layers of reality, you should check out the Mindful Moments YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's our channel.
It's our channel, and it offers AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques. The whole goal is inspiring reflection and rational thought, just like we're doing here, so go check it out.
Absolutely. Rational thought is the antidote to blind custom.
Okay, we are back. We left off with Plato. Now, usually when I think of Plato, I immediately think of the allegory of the cave. Prisoners chained up, looking at shadows. How does the essay connect that to custom?
Well, in the context of this analysis, the cave isn't just about metaphysics. It's a powerful critique of society. The prisoners are us. The chains are our customs.
And the shaddies on the wall.
Those are the conventions we mistake for reality.
So when we obsess over things like social status or money or being fashionable, Plato is saying we're literally just staring at a puppet show on a cave wall.
Yes. We think those things are real and important. We think I must have this career path or I must act this way. But if you break the chains, if you use reason, you can turn around, walk out of the cave and see the sun. You see the truth or physis.
The essay uses this phrase, the tyranny of custom. That feels really heavy. It implies that tradition isn't just a comfort blanket, it's more like a prison warden.
It acts as a blinder. If you never question why you do what you do, you aren't living a conscious life. You're just reciting lines from a script someone else wrote.
And Plato took this to an extreme.
He did. He didn't just want to critique customs. He wanted to engineer them out of existence. The essay brings up his most shocking proposal for his ideal city.
I think I know where you're going with this. This is the part where he talks about the family, isn't it?
Yes. Plato proposed abolishing the family entirely for his class of guardians, the leaders.
This always blows my mind. Abolishing the family, no moms, no dads, children raised by the state. It just sounds like a dystopian nightmare. Why on earth did he think this was a good idea?
Well, it goes back to that core idea, logic versus custom. Plato looked at the family and he didn't see love. He saw bias. He saw nepotism.
Yeah.
If I'm a leader and I have a son, I'm naturally going to want to give him the best job, the best advantages, even if he's an idiot.
Okay, looking at some political dynasties in the real world, I kind of see his point. Family loyalty can be the enemy of justice.
Exactly. Plato thought that private loyalty fractured the state. He wanted the guardians to view the entire city as their family. He wanted to replace the custom of kinship with the pure logic of merit and unity.
It is the ultimate example of treating a sacred institution as just a nomos that can be completely rewritten. But honestly, it just chills me to the bone. It feels like trying to engineer the humanity out of humans.
And that reaction you're feeling, that is the other side of the coin. That is the argument that customs aren't just arbitrary chains. They are the things that make us human. And this sets up the tension perfectly with our next thinker, Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Rousseau, the man who said, man is born free and everywhere he is in chains.
That is the one. So if Plato thinks we need to engineer society to be more rational, Rousseau thinks that society itself is the problem. He argues for natural goodness. He believes that in our natural state in physis, we are good, we're empathetic, and we're free.
And then civilization comes along with its rules and its manners and its property laws.
And it corrupts us. The essay highlights this conflict beautifully. On one side, you have thinkers like Edmund Burke who say customs are repositories of wisdom. They're the accumulated knowledge of our ancestors.
The fence is there for a reason, so don't just tear it down.
Don't tear it down until you know why it was put up.
The wisdom of the ages. Just because I don't understand why a rule exists doesn't mean it's useless. It might be keeping the peace in ways I can't even see.
Precisely. But Rousseau looks at that same fence and says, that fence is a cage. He views conventions as obstacles to justice. He argues that social rules make us fake. They force us to compete for status, to lie, to care more about what others think than what we truly feel.
This feels like the central tension of modern life. On one hand, we need customs to function. I need to know you won't attack me, that you'll drive on the correct side of the road.
We need order.
But on the other hand, the pressure to conform, to fit into the box of society, can make us miserable and anxious.
And the essay digs into how that control actually works. It's not just laws. It's the fear of ostracism. We're social animals. We're terrified of being cast out.
It's the high school cafeteria effect, just applied to the whole world.
It is. And that is why we follow conventions, even when they seem irrational. We wear the uncomfortable clothes. We say the polite things we don't mean, because the alternative, being the other, is psychologically terrifying.
That is the mechanism of the tyranny of custom.
It weaponizes our need for belonging against our own freedom.
So we're stuck. We can't live in Plato's, frankly, creepy authoritarian commune where the state raises our kids. But we also can't just run off into the woods and live like noble savages because, well, no Wi-Fi and no antibiotics.
Right. So where does this leave us? What's the synthesis here?
What's the takeaway?
The essay argues that the solution is not to burn it all down, but to develop critical thinking. It forces us to apply a kind of legitimacy test to the customs in our own lives.
A legitimacy test. I like that. How does it work?
You have to look at a rule and ask, what is this serving? Is this custom a repository of wisdom that promotes social cohesion and makes life smoother, like queuing up in a line?
Sure, that makes sense.
If so, keep it. We need that kind of order.
Okay. And if it fails the test?
If the custom limits individual liberty without a good reason, or if it perpetuates injustice like historical customs regarding race or gender or even just toxic workplace cultures, then you identify it as a mere convention, a shadow on the wall.
And you work to change it.
And you work to change it.
So the well-informed person isn't a rebel who breaks every rule just to be edgy, and they're not a sheep who follows every rule blindly. They're discerning.
Exactly. They are the operator of the machine, not just a cog within it. They understand the difference between physis, what is real, and convention, what is merely agreed upon. They participate in society, but they are never fully enslaved by it because they know it's just a game we're all playing.
That is incredibly empowering. It turns philosophy from this abstract thing into a daily tool. It gives you permission to ask why without feeling crazy.
And that is the power of analysis like this. It reminds us that everything around us, our government, our manners, our economy, was made by people. And if it was made by people, it can be improved by people.
I think that balance is what is so difficult to find, though, because as we talked about, the force of habit is just so strong. It takes a lot of mental energy to constantly run this legitimacy test.
It does. It can be exhausting. That's why most people just live in the cave. It's comfortable in the cave. The shadows are familiar. but the essay suggests that the effort is the price of freedom.
If you stop thinking, you stop being a citizen and start being a subject.
A subject to the tyranny of custom. That circles us right back to the beginning. We started with the simple handshake, a simple gesture. But now I'm realizing that every time I shake a hand, I am reinforcing a social contract.
You are, and that's fine. Shaking hands is a good convention. It signals peace and openness. But imagine if the custom was that you had to give everyone you met $5.
That would be a convention I would be very eager to rewrite.
Exactly. And you'd recognize that it's not a law of nature, it's just a rule. And rules can be changed if enough people agree to change them. That's the hope embedded in this analysis. We are not victims of our culture. We are the creators of it.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today. From the handshake to the cave, from the tyranny of custom to the corruption of society. It's wild how much depth is hidden in the things we just take for granted.
It really is.
And I want to leave the listener with a specific challenge, a bit of homework, if you will.
Let's hear it.
We talked about shadows on the wall. I want you to identify one rule you follow every single day. Maybe it's how you act in a relationship. Maybe it's a career expectation you're chasing. Maybe it's just something you feel you have to do to be a good person.
Okay.
Ask yourself, is this a law of nature? Is it physis? Or is it just a shadow on the wall of the cave that you've agreed to believe in?
That is the challenge. Don't just listen. Think. And if you want to keep thinking, if you want to go deeper into this essay and others like it, click the link on the screen for more on this and other essay subjects. Subscribe, share, purchase via the link, and most importantly, think rationally.
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go.